Hello, hello. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're going to let people continue to join and kind of land, enter the room. Welcome. Hopefully you're all having a nice start to your Thursday. We are here in Ann Arbor, so hopefully you are as well. Give people a moment just to continue to join. All right, excellent. Nice to see so many people. I can kind of see the numbers as you all are coming in. Really excited to have so many of you here. We want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Creating a No Drama Work Culture. My name is Joni. I'm a trainer here at Zingtrain. I'm going to be your host today. I'm thrilled to be here alongside our fabulous special guest, Lisa Schultz, restaurant manager of Zingerman's Roadhouse. We also have Mara, our keynote liaison, and Alice, our digital media manager. They're here with us behind the scenes. They're monitoring chat and questions along with me. You'll see them pop things into the chat throughout. We are coming to you live from Ann Arbor, Michigan, but we would love to hear where you are tuning in from. If you wouldn't mind dropping your location into the chat. So click the chat icon along the bottom of your Zoom screen, type in where you're tuning in from and a hello. It's nice to see so many people from New Orleans and Georgia and Ann Arbor. Glad to see there's people in the city here. I can't even keep up with all of them. If you happen to see somebody who is in your neighborhood, feel free to drop them a line and say hello. And then we'll take some time. And it's nice to see so many familiar names too. So welcome to all of you. Really glad to have you all here. We're going to dive into the good stuff in just a moment. But before we do that, a little housekeeping. So for the format for today's webinar, we're going to be in kind of conversation and presenting for kind of most of the time. And then we're going to leave some time for Q&A at the end. We are going to be collecting questions for the Q&A throughout the webinar time. So feel free to submit any questions you have using the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So if you have a question, type it in there. We're going to do our best to get to as many questions as we can. But if we do not have an opportunity to answer your question, we'll do our best to make sure we get you that answer in the days to come. There is also closed captioning available during today's presentation. If you would like to turn that on, Alice is going to drop in details into the chat. You can find the closed captioning button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And last item of business is that we are recording the session and we will be sending out the recording in the next day or two. So be sure to be on the lookout for that in your inbox soon. It'll also live on zingtrain.com in our resources tab for really all of time. And you can find a whole bunch of resources and information there as well, including all of our past webinars. So getting to the topic at hand, creating no drama. Before we dive into that, I want to share just quick background. I've met many of you who are on this webinar, which is very exciting, but a little bit about me as in relation to Lisa. I started in our organization back in 2003 when I was hired in as a frontline employee as part of the opening of Zingerman's Roadhouse. And while working at the Roadhouse, that is where I met Lisa. Lisa and I worked together both as peers. We were both servers for many years together. Then I became one of the assistant restaurant managers. Then she became one of the assistant restaurant managers. I went into catering. Lisa became the restaurant manager. We worked together for, I think, about 12 years in total before I moved over to Zingtrain. And we've known each other, kind of doing the math, I think for almost 19 years, which is kind of crazy. And I feel like Lisa and I could probably spend an hour or even a whole week just telling stories of the Roadhouse and of culture and probably of drama that has existed or what we did when the drama ensued. But we're not here just to tell stories. Obviously, I'm really excited that Lisa said yes when we invited her to share with us and with all of you the no drama culture that she's been working on to create at the restaurant. And so Lisa's going to be sharing how she teaches this at the Roadhouse. And while we know not all of you work in the food industry, we do know that you are people working with other people. And when people get together, drama can ensue. So I encourage you, while Lisa is sharing, that you begin to think about how you can apply this to your specific industry and your specific business. And of course, as you have questions, and email us after. We would love to talk and dive into how this really can relate to the work that you do. So with all of that, I am going to get out of the way. I'm excited to pass things off to my friend, Zingerman's Roadhouse current restaurant manager, but soon to be managing partner, Lisa Schultz, who's going to be teaching us no drama. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Joni. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Again, my name is Lisa Schultz, and I've worked at Zingerman's Roadhouse for almost the last 18 years on several different roles. I was a server, like Joni said in the beginning. I'm also an assistant dining room manager. I've been restaurant manager for almost 10 years, and I'm on my path to partnership, which is super, super exciting, and hopefully will come to fruition in the next couple of months. So. All right, let's get into the content here. All right, so this is a quote, but I'm just gonna give it to you how I teach the folks at the Roadhouse. And then I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, which I'll be happy to answer for you. So we start off with a quote by Stephen Hawking: "When you complain, nobody wants to help you," which I have found to be very true. All right, a little bit of history of the no drama work at the Roadhouse. Some of you, maybe all of you know, that most places of business and especially restaurants can be known for sources of drama and stress. We hit those, we have 3 meal periods a day. We're open 7 days a week. There's going to be those rushes. There's going to be those times where everyone's kind of running around, and it can be chaotic, although we don't want it to be. So in order to combat that, it started off as a joke from Ari, who said, why don't we create something, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but like a BLC, like a recipe for creating, no drama at the Roadhouse. And I was like, sure, like it sounds good, but that's never going to work, or that's never going to happen. So it started off as a joke. And we quickly realized, however, after really thinking about it, that it's actually could work. And it's something that we probably actually should do to help improve the culture of the Roadhouse. So Ari helped develop the no drama content, which we then added to a revamped Welcome to the Roadhouse class, which is just an introductory class for all staff that start at the Roadhouse. All right, so why we teach the no drama, which we're going to go through the entire time, but there's some good reasons here. It helps us to lay a foundation of positive expectations from all staff members, including leaders. So this is certainly not just what we expect from our staff, but also from literally everybody in the building. It provides commonality of language, so everybody knows what we're talking about and we're all on the same page. We're going to go through some of that stuff, and I will explain what it means. But it helps so that when I reference something and I say something kind of specific, they're not like, what are you talking about? They know, folks, everyone knows exactly what we're all talking about. It helps to provide techniques around energy management, so personal energy management and energy management for the entire shift that can be used for sure at the Roadhouse. So that's really where the expectation comes in. But it's also something that you can use in your personal life, which is fantastic. It's also easier to reinforce when things do happen, which they're going to. We're all human, and we're still going to hit those, some stressful points pretty much every day, probably on every shift and every meal period, like I said. But it's easier to reinforce when it's laid out up front. So people know exactly, right? There's not like if I say or refer to something or ask someone not to do something or to do something, there's not like I don't even know what you're talking about. It's like, nope, we all know right from the beginning what I'm talking about and what expectations are. All right, so this is the content of the material. So we start off with things that we ask people not to do. I often preface this with, these are pretty elementary in a good way. And you may have learned all of these in kindergarten, to be quite honest. And sometimes I get some snickers, but it's kind of true. So number one thing that we ask folks not to do is to not put people down. No putting people down, right? Seems like, well, sure, duh, but sometimes that happens, and sometimes it happens way too often. So there really is an expectation of that we're respectful to each other. We act in a dignified way. We expect that you're not speaking, again, putting people down or saying mean things to people. Pretty simple, but sometimes doesn't hold up. So lay it out right in front. Number two is that we ask folks, again, including managers, frontline staff, everybody in the building, to refrain from negative language. So again, this is easy. This happens. We're all human. This is probably part of our lives on a daily basis. But when you're at the Roadhouse, we ask that you refrain from negative language like, ugh, like I'm so annoyed with so-and-so, or this shift is just really, really ridiculous. Like, why am I even here? Right? Like that kind of stuff. And there's tons of things that you can think of in your own way, in your own businesses, and that you've heard before and that you've thought yourself. But again, when we're at work, we ask you to refrain from negative language. Similarly, number 3 is that we ask that you minimize dramatic language. So in the same way, right, we're going to have challenging shifts. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be, right, things will happen. But we ask that people, same thing, right? Like, God, that shift sucked, or like, blah, blah, blah. Or just, again, that you can think of a million things of how you could be dramatic in your language in the workplace. And we just ask that you be mindful and to not be dramatic. Number 4 is no skunking. So this is a term that I learned at a service seminar in New York several years ago. And it's basically the opposite of going direct with somebody. So if there is a conflict or an issue, we will encourage, which we'll get into in a minute as well, but we will encourage you to go direct with that person. And skunking would be the opposite of that. So if something happened the day before and I was frustrated with, the way somebody said something to me, and then I came into work the next day and instead of going to the person to talk to them about it, I went to a different person that had nothing to do with the issue and said, oh my gosh, can I tell you what happened yesterday? This was so ridiculous. So-and-so and so said this to me, right? That's skunking. So I talked to one person, maybe I go to another person and I'm like, hey, can I tell you what happened? This is so crazy. I can't believe so-and-so said this, right? We've all heard it. It seems petty. It is petty. But we ask that not happen, right? So skunking, a skunk, right, stinks, right, or can when it sprays. So we don't want to smell. We don't want to smell that. So we ask that you refrain from the gossip essentially, and we ask that you then go direct and resolve the issue with the person that something may have happened with. And the last one on here of things that we ask you not to do is that we do want you to consider right place, right time, and right people. So in the example that I just gave, if you do need to go direct with somebody and it's at 8 o'clock on a Friday night in the middle of the restaurant, it's probably not the best place and time to do it, nor the people around you, the right people to, probably nobody should hear, right? It might be a conversation that you just have with one other person. So to be mindful of those things, because I've definitely seen that as well. When somebody finally gets the courage, or they're like, okay, great, I am going to go direct with, so-and-so, but then they go do it at the host stand, like I said, and with a whole bunch of people around that don't know anything about the situation and probably shouldn't know anything about the situation, is really not the right time and place to do it, nor the right people. This also, I'd like to remind folks, applies with email. So sometimes when there are issues that arise and we need to be communicating via email, adding 5 different groups that might go out to 50 different people on something that's really just meant for a small group of people, that's not appropriate either. So just to be considering this on all levels. So those are the 5 of the things that we ask folks not to do. And then we get into the fun stuff on the things that we offer and encourage you to do. So number 1, like I referenced, is to go direct. Again, it's basically what it is, and that you talk if there is a conflict or an issue, so like again, somebody rubbed you the wrong way, that we want you to talk directly to that person at the right time in the right place, and with probably no other people around, unless that makes sense to have that happen. There's some specific things that go along with going direct in our organization. So these are the actual steps to going direct. Number 1 is to actually go direct and have that courageous conversation, we say. If that doesn't work for some reason, then we ask that you put it in writing, which sometimes can happen. Number 3, put it in writing and meet with your manager present. We've definitely had to come to these points depending on the circumstance and the situation, because they're not all cut and dry, and I'm sure you've experienced this on some level. And then if things really can't get resolved, then we ask that it get presented at the partners group level, which I think perhaps that hasn't ever happened. I could be wrong about that, but there's still some steps to follow just in the event that things don't get resolved with the first go, which again, can happen. Okay. So number 2, practice generous assumptions. This is a big one for myself and a lot of people that get this material. So generous assumptions is in believing the best instead of expecting the worst in people. This is something that I personally have had to practice. And when I present the material, it sometimes can take years and I consistently work on it, but it's very easy. And again, I'm sure you all can relate where we fall into this rut where we're like, oh my gosh, like there's so-and-so goes again with whatever it is that they're doing, right? You get frustrated. You're just like, assume the worst, like, oh, yep, there they go, messing up again. There they go, late again. That's the reality is though, is that most of us don't know everything that's going on in each other's lives and right, like at all. So sometimes just like all of us have experienced on some level, maybe you just broke up with a significant other. Maybe you just had to put a pet down. Maybe you found out that somebody has, a terminal illness, right? Maybe you got a ticket before you came into work. So you just, again, shit happens, stuff happens, it happens to all of us. And then we just ask that you come from a place of goodness instead of just expecting the worst in other people. All right, so this is an exercise, something that Ari came up with. Thank you, Ari. It's called SBA, and it's very simple. It's just stop, breathe, and appreciate somebody. And during the class, I'll pick somebody in the audience. And usually it's somebody newer to the crew. And I'll just give them a really nice compliment on that. We're so happy that they joined the team and they're doing fantastic so far. And we're so happy to have them. And it like brightens every time I do it. Like I feel so good from just doing the example. And the person is generally like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I'm like, this is the point, right? This is something helpful to do when you feel your energy going down or you're in a really stressful moment. And if you just take a minute, you can do it right in where you're standing. Like, again, it's simple, easy, and effective. Stop, breathe, and appreciate. Something similar, also, thank you, Ari, is the 3 and out rule. So also applies to the same kind of circumstance. So you're, again, in the middle of a busy shift or, whatever, you're just like, oh, I just need to go take a breath out back, which we encourage you to do if need be. So it would be to turn to 3 people or in some fashion, find 3 people and appreciate them. So it could be somebody standing next to you. It could be you go out back and you text your cousin that you haven't talked to in a couple of years. It could be later that night, which, usually it's meant to be like in the moment, but, you go and call somebody, your mom, hey, haven't talked to you in a little while. I just want to appreciate you and let you know that I love you. So same kind of concept. If you just do it, it doesn't take long. It will make you feel better and bring you back to a more grounded place. So again, simple and effective. Rating code greens. So this is something that we have within our culture and organization here at Zingerman's. And it's basically capturing positive information from guests about food or service. So just another form of again, like appreciation for the things that we do. It is an internal system, but a lot of times it's capturing, like I said, information from guests. We also can write it service like to and from each other. So if somebody was a fantastic teammate that day, then I'll also encourage folks to write that up because that's great too. All right, end each shift thinking about one good thing that happened in the day. This is a good one and something I think I know I can continue to improve upon. Is bringing this up at the end when you're, cashing people out or you're checking people out. Even though, shifts will be stressful, they can be stressful, absolutely. But if you encourage folks to think about something good that happened, instead of just storming out the door, being frustrated with, like a frenetic shift or something that didn't go as smoothly as we'd like it to. If we encourage this, it's just like a decompressing, right? Like an appreciation. Oh yeah, like it was a stressful shift, but I did get to meet so-and-so that came in and we totally bonded and connected. And I was able to tell them about Sing Train or was able to tell them something about the organization, whatever it is. It's much better to leave the building on that level instead of just like, again, rushing out and being like, oh God, I can't wait to get out of here. So something positive. Move with pace is a very good one, and especially for restaurant folks out there and probably in other businesses as well. But moving with pace is important, and that we encourage folks to make sure they're being mindful of not moving too slowly, right? So sometimes we get folks that they're new to the industry, and if you're moving too slowly, somebody will run into you. And if you're moving too fast and frenetically, well, it's just not helpful. You might run into each other, might drop a tray or spill something, or right, which we don't want that to happen either. So moving with pace is important, that we're always in that kind of like middle ground and moving slowly or moving steadily throughout the shift in whatever area it is that you're working. Come to huddles and use bottom line change. So these are two things specific to the organization. Kind of unique, cool things that we do with open book finance, our huddles. That's what we talk about, financial metrics and other metrics that we're going over and sharing with the staff. So we have these weekly. So we encourage folks to come to these to stay caught up on what's going on, good info share so people know where we're at financially as well, which is super important. And then bottom line change is the recipe for implementing any change in the organization, big or small. So again, they're just kind of cool Zingerman's things that I know we teach through ZingTrain, but we also make sure staff know what these things are and encourage them to utilize them. Bubbling up. So this is a fun little technique that I learned at a seminar many years ago now from Anise Kavanaugh, for any of you that know her. She's wonderful. So it's basically imagining that there's an imaginary bubble around you, 18 inches in every direction, right? So on each side, underneath you, and that is your own personal space. And if you imagine that when somebody does come up and they're exuding any kind of negativity, or maybe they're doing the skunking, if you just are like, you're not going to permeate my bubble. This is my own positive personal space. And I'm just gonna, if there's any negativity outside of it, it's just gonna bounce right off and go back to you. I'm not gonna let you ruin my day, kind of a thing. So it's kind of like fun and silly, but it works. It can work. So it's fun. Utilize it if you like. And committing to doing 3 internal extra miles per day. So extra miles are little kind of added extra things that we do both for our guests and our staff. It can be something like for internally for staff, it could be, helping somebody with side work. It could be, grabbing them a cup of coffee and like surprising them. Maybe somebody's feeling under the weather. So you go, grab them a cup of tea, just kind of letting them know that you care about them. We also, like I said, have these on the guest side of things, which will probably look different, but we want the staff to be cognizant of doing nice little, and they can, like I said, little quick extra things to show appreciation for those around them. So those are the things that we ask folks to do. Some of the benefits of teaching this, the no drama work. Everybody understands the common goal to create and maintain a culture of positivity. So again, when it's a couple of months in, and if we reference some of these, or we're like, hey, remember when we talked about this during, the Welcome to the Roadhouse class, or like, this is something that we really do expect everybody, including if I'm, coaching somebody, myself as well, to do. It's not surprising to anybody, right? They've heard it before. They know that this is an expectation for everybody that works in the building. It's also easier to coach staff members kind of on the same level that I just mentioned, because again, the language is already ingrained, the ideas are already there, and whether people are using it or not, we can still reference that, hey, we did teach this up front. We put this in the Welcome to the Roadhouse class intentionally, because we want everybody to understand, to be on board, and to, hopefully abide by the things and lead by example. It builds on our work with energy management, which is a little section, and we're not going to get into it today, but is another section in that class that follows, just about, again, helping to maintain good personal energy, and then being cognizant of the energy on shift. So this kind of works in tandem with some of that work, which I'm happy to talk about or take questions, and that could be a whole other webinar. So maybe that's the next one. Everyone is on the same page from the very beginning, like I mentioned. So right there, there's no, people should, as long as they've taken the class, of course, right? Because that's where we really get into it. But as long as everyone has taken that class, they get that information right from the start. All right, and then another quote that I read, I usually read it in the beginning, kind of with the other quote that I read, but which exemplifies a lot of this stuff. This is from Sam Cass, a White House chef under President Obama. Said, the key in a restaurant and the key in any kind of high pressure situation, I think, is that 75% of success is staying calm and not losing your nerve. The rest you figure out, but once you lose your calm, everything starts falling apart fast. So that can happen very easily. So these are some things that will help this not to happen.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You say that's it, but yet it was so much information
Yeah.
and lots of comments in
Got
the
it?
chat too. I believe it was answered, but yes, we will give you the slide deck and the recording, all of these things, so you have access to this information. And the Q&A and the chat have been active with some questions. So if it's all right, Lisa, I will ask you some of these questions.
Yeah.
So the first one, there were some suggestions for interview questions to try to help determine a potential applicant or potential employee's no drama mindset. And then there was kind of a follow-up comment to that, was somebody agreed with that question above, would love to find a good way to weed out the high drama folks, because weirdly, the I hate drama folks are oftentimes the highest drama. So are there ways, or is there any type of questions that you ask that help you figure out somebody's mindset around drama or no drama?
Oh, that's a good question. And actually something that I should probably focus on, and having something related to that, or like, tell me like a story or like a situation. Sometimes you can by like, yeah, tell me a situation, like how you handle this.
Mhm.
But I actually don't have anything directly related to that in my interview questions, but it's a fantastic idea and could help, right? And like developing something like that to help weed those folks out in the beginning. I mean, sometimes you can tell, depending on just how folks respond to questions, even if it's not related to, like a dramatic situation or something.
Yeah.
But if you ask them like enough questions, sometimes you can get a feel for their personality or not, too. Sometimes you hire folks and then you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought I was going to be getting.
Yeah.
That's a good idea though.
Makes me think too of just the quote you just shared too, of how you handle situations. So yeah, questions of how, if this happened, how would you handle it? And it might not tell you the full picture, but it'll give you those little snippets into it, which I think
the open-ended are very good.
Yes, they can be helpful. Stephanie King asked, what suggestions do you have for staff who may have limitations with communication? So potentially struggling with reading or writing, or English as a second language. How do you help make sure that the entire team learns all of this?
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, like I said, it's in the class, it's reinforced on shift, and through coaching. I mean, if we haven't done it in Spanish, which would be good, because there's lots of Spanish speaking folks at the restaurant. So it would be good to translate that, which I don't believe that we've done for this class yet. But I mean, I guess if folks like learn in different ways, or, again, some people might not be hearing it from the beginning. So I think it's really important that things are being reinforced on shift, because if it's just, again, you all know, like if you hear it or read it once, a lot of times it's not totally going to sink in. But if you have those coaching conversations with folks, I think it's imperative that that's follow up to what this is, when we're giving this in the beginning. So if you see things not happening, but I would also, if you see things happening, I would take the time to also like praise people, to be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool that you're like using this or that technique, or I saw you doing that. So I think reinforcing after the fact is super important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Catherine was asking, can you tell us more about bubbling up?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty simple. And it's just like, if you choose, now some people aren't going to like relate to it or want to use it. And some people, when I bring it up, are just kind of like, okay, that's silly. And like, sure, it's silly, but like, it can be effective if you want it to be. So it is literally just like, as you go through, I mean, honestly, like your entire life is really the idea of it, but it can be at any point that you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to bubble up right now. But it's the idea that you have your own personal space, and everybody should have their own personal space, even if nothing bad happens to them, or that, you're kind of combating the negativity or somebody like doing the skunking or the complaining around you. It's like, we all should have that, right? For lots of good reason. But especially in this context, if you do encounter the, like, somebody, I don't know, you might get like yelled at by a customer, or like maybe a staff member is like really upset, or it's just the, like, which I know we've all experienced, the, somebody that's just like in a really, maybe they're just not in a good mood, or just like more of a negative, they like to express their negativity, which again is not helpful in what we're asking people not to do, but you're going to get it at some point. And you might get it at like the grocery store. So this is why it's kind of cool. You can use this stuff everywhere, but you might hear somebody complaining, and you're just like, okay, I don't want to hear it. Instead of like letting that be like, oh, because it's easy to let those things impact us, right? And so instead of being like, oh God, that really brought me down, it's like, I'm not going to let you bring me down. Like can kind of manage my own space. And so when I hear those things, it's like, you're not going to negatively impact or affect my day. I'm going to make sure that I'm staying in a good mindset and moving forward.
That makes sense. It makes me think of Lisa and I have similar-ish age children. And there's just as children, I'm rubber, you're glue, what bounces or what you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. Like, let it bounce off it. Let it bounce off of your bubble. Keep your bubble there so it doesn't kind of penetrate and actually stick to you, because I'm rubber. It'll bounce off. I don't know if that works as a saying as adults, but it makes me think of that.
It's basically the same concept.
I like it. I think it makes sense. So question, how long does it take to implement no drama in an organization? So, certainly the Roadhouse wasn't doing this from day one. There probably was drama, which was kind of the impetus of needing to talk about no drama. How long does it take to implement, to be able to really make this part of the culture?
Well, I think it depends on like how many places that you're putting it into. So I guess I kind of forgot about, it is mostly in this class that's ongoing when we teach it, but in the beginning, right? Because if you don't do it to existing staff, you don't teach the material to existing staff, you're kind of missing potentially a big group of people if you're only focusing on the folks coming in. So I think it's really important to any like department meetings that you're having, weekly meetings or what have you. I taught it to our lead servers, right? Like once we, got it into the material, into the class material, I taught just like I did just this section for them and then had a discussion around it. I'm pretty sure I've done it at a couple other department meetings, but that's a very good question. It's important that you are getting it to everybody that's there. And it's definitely going to be met with resistance. And some people are going to roll their eyes. And that's why I say, like, these are really basic things, but they're really important things. So make sure that you're that you're being nice and respectful to each other. But that's a good question. You have to get it in lots of different places so everybody knows what's going on. And then I think now it works okay that it's just in that class, but we are going to go back and, I think that also makes sense. We've talked about reteaching that material again, because we have like some new lead servers. So going to those department meetings and reteaching the information from time to time.
That's great. I like that. Amanda was asking, how do you encourage the complainers to complain less and actually like share or think about solutions?
Again, I think it's a lot of the coaching, like on shift. It's what you see. And then sometimes what people tell you, right? Like, I don't like love the tattling culture or whatever, but sometimes it's helpful. And so if you hear it say something, it's like the tacit approval thing, right? Like if you teach the information and then you hear it on shift and you don't say something like, hey, remember when we've talked about like the no skunking, if there's an issue, like I'm happy to help you resolve it. Like, is there something that can I help you with going direct with somebody? Or is this something, let me know how I can help you instead of just being negative on shift because it's really bringing people down. That's important.
Yeah. Naya asked, how do you differentiate between drama and concerns that actually need to be addressed?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. And that's where it is kind of up to folks to be truthful about things. And if something does just seem like petty. So again, you have to kind of figure out like, hey, like, what's the issue? Just kind of like, let me know what's going on and how I can help. And if somebody is just like, well, I'm annoyed, they're probably all like legitimate on some level. I mean, right, there is pettiness, but a lot of times if people are complaining, well, there's probably an underlying issue. And if it is with a specific individual, then it is important that we're coaching folks to feel comfortable in resolving that and like going direct or having a mediated conversation. So, I mean, I would say it does take that work, right? So this is like laying it out up front, but you'll need to, if you don't do that follow-up work, I mean, it's probably still going to exist entirely or on some level where you want to like continue to minimize it. So.
Yeah. And I imagine it's coaching and feedback too of, yeah, this is a concern. Like, thank you for bringing it up. And then there's those moments where this does feel more like complaining, or let's direct them into a more constructive conversation. Sure. The constructive conversations oftentimes start when there's a little bit of drama. It's let's just not stay in the drama. Let's actually move on. Or
like if you need, let's step out back. Why don't you vent for a minute? Like, right. Some people just want to be heard. And then again, pulling out from there, like, is this something like, is it a systems issue? Is it a conflict with another person? Like, I mean, there can be all kinds of things that hopefully we can help to rectify.
Yeah. Ben, and this might be something other people have in common. So Ben has an employee who is the champion of negativity. And this behavior can often bleed into gossip and more drama. She's oftentimes a 5 out of 5 on the things on the not to do list. So not great. We want to obviously change the behavior. In your experience, is it better to go full force or start with kind of baby steps or those small steps of the things to do?
I mean, I think it depends on the person, right? And like, I mean, it also requires like some amount of buy-in. Yeah. So, I mean, you might give people the tools, you might ask them to do them. They may or may not. So I think it's going to depend on the circumstance. I find when there's somebody who is like you're referencing, that it's really important just to sit down and talk and to have the conversation of like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, of the things that we do. We've talked about asking staff, including managers, not to do. It's, I don't see these things being followed. Like, let me know, like, what's going on, like, this is not helpful for the entire culture, but it sounds like maybe there's something that we can actually help with, right? Is it like a personal conflict? Again, is it a systems? Do they not have the materials they need to do their job effectively, right? It could be like, maybe it's all of them, but I think just sitting down and like getting them in a calm space and then, asking what's going on. And then while also referencing, like, we really are still encouraging these things and we really need to see like the skunking is hurting everybody. So like, let's get to the bottom of it kind of a thing. That's what I would first recommend.
What I really like that you did with it is when you think of being dramatic, that's very much an attitude. Like, you're just being so dramatic. And they're like, well, no, I'm not. You can argue when somebody says that with you. Right. What you all did was take the idea or the attitude of dramatic and you turned it into behaviors like no skunking and managing your energy and all of these things. And when you make them behaviors, you can turn them into expectations. So being able to share that, like, I see you skunking, like I hear it, you did it to me. Right. That's very different than saying you're being dramatic. It's you are skunking. And then you can start to coach them on those small things. And so I imagine that has probably helped. And I really like that. Anna asked, where is the line between giving the benefit of the doubt and having generous assumptions and knowing when the person has performance issues and is no longer a good fit?
Well, I think it depends on systems. I think it depends on circumstances. So I think that's where you really benefit from having conversations with the staff member. They may not, and it's true with a lot of people, that again, you don't know, and they're not disclosing that information. So like really sitting down to figure out what is happening, like what, and maybe there's 6 huge things in their life that are really preventing them from, whatever, having good performance, to getting to work on time, to, whatever it might be. So I think it would also be to try to like, and again, some folks still aren't going to disclose everything to you, but I guess to sit down and kind of, again, try to figure out what's going on, but to also make it clear that like, how can we help? And then if this continues, we're still going to have to follow our, attendance policy or like tardiness policy or something like that. So I would say just really try to see what's going on in folks' lives, knowing that sometimes people don't want to tell you and won't tell you. If that's going to be the case though, and you're really trying to assume generously and help and support those folks. And then you still see issues. I mean, sometimes you do just have to go down a disciplinary track.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a question. Doesn't this approach kind of offload the drama onto family and friends? So if we talked about encouraging people to think of something positive before they leave, but if they're really upset, they'll leave and then blow off steam later to people in their personal life.
Yeah, I would say what I really like about the work, and like, it depends on how people want and choose to vent, right? And so these techniques, which is what I really love about them, and lots of things within the organization, but it gives you different techniques. So it doesn't mean you can't go and vent to your mom or your sister or your family and friends. I find myself doing that less so, which is, again, it's not a bad thing when people do that. But if you're employing other techniques to, help stay calm and grounded, then, maybe you choose to go the route of like, I'm just going to appreciate like a couple folks around me, or I'm going to like do some deep breathing for a minute, instead of it always having to be, I'm just going to go and complain to everyone else in my life.
Mhm.
Again, if that's not a bad thing, if people choose to do that, but this is going to give you other ways to stay grounded in your life. So sure, maybe it does offload more into other people in your life, but maybe not. Maybe they employ different techniques for their own personal kind of like energy management.
Yeah, I like that. There was a question within a question that I'm going to pull out. The quote of "When you complain, no one wants to help." What do you ask people to do instead?
Well, to not complain and ask for help. I mean, that's, those are the folks that are doing the like the skunking or the negativity or the like, I can't believe this is that way. And you're just like inclined, or I mean, I think most people are inclined to just walk the other way, right? Instead of like, oh, some people might say, okay, it sounds like you're upset or in not a great mind space or headspace or whatever. How can I help you? But I mean, I think the idea is kind of the opposite of both of those.
Yeah.
So not complaining, right? But which, again, sometimes you need to complain, and asking for help.
Yeah. And I think there's a fine balance between complaining and talking, or complaining and, sharing ideas or sharing, thoughts, because it doesn't mean you can't go and ask for help. It's just in the approach. I'm not just going to dwell in the comments or dwell in the reality that I'm in. It's like, how can we move out of this? And so I think the conversation takes a different shape when it's not just complaining, but it actually begins to become constructive. So I would agree. Let's see. Another question here. Are there tools in knowing where to draw the line? So someone having a bad day or someone who is just continually having issues come up. So someone who more maybe plays the victim role or has the victim mentality.
Yeah. I mean, I know I keep going back to the same thing, but I think it's really kind of figuring out like where that's coming from, because we all have bad days. We're all still going to not use generous assumption at some point, and whether it's at work or again, like outside of work. But sorry, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Let me scroll back up. So someone who's just having a bad day.
Yeah.
And someone who is just continually having issues happen.
Yeah. So I think it's trying to get to the root of like, what's going on, right? And if this is the way that you react in general to negativity, like how can we get you to react differently if it's just like, again, reacting to something that's going on in their lives. So I think when those things happen, and they do happen, I mean, I think it really is important that we're like addressing it. It might be like a 3-minute conversation off to the side, or it might be a like, hey, like maybe can we sit down and talk about like, these are some of the things I'm seeing. It doesn't, you don't seem to be like kind of like identifying with these things that we put forward. So why don't we, create some time to chat a little bit later. So it's just you and I, and we can take some time to talk it through. I mean, if those things don't happen, probably on some level, again, big or small, chances are the behaviors from those folks are just going to continue.
Yeah, that's true. There was a question from Noelle. There are times when I don't say anything because I don't want to be dramatic. Do you have any guidelines or advice? Because I think a lot of people do tend to bite their tongue because they don't want to be dramatic. And then they're holding things in that maybe are actually very relevant.
Right.
So what's the advice for the person of when to bring things up?
Yeah, I would say that that just goes back to the tacit approval, which I know that like, I mean, I live it every day, right? And sometimes I do bite my tongue and it's probably not the best move to make. So I mean, I think I've learned to, if I'm going to say something in the moment, and a lot of times I think it's probably a good choice, I mean, or not, it's circumstantial, but learn how to say it in a very calm manner instead of like reacting to like, so if someone's like, blah, 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 instead of being like, remember, I told you that we're not supposed to, like, if I react that way back to them, they're probably going to be like, it's not probably going to be effective. So I think learning how to say stuff calmly in the moment and just like a check to somebody to be like, hey, I mean, it sounds like you're in a really negative space right now. Is there anything I can do to help you out? Right. And then you might have a follow-up conversation later. But I think it is important. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more people expect that they're going to get called out, even if it's in a very calm way. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, because like, again, if we're not doing those things, the likelihood that something's going to change is pretty low.
Yeah. Lindsay asked, how do you prevent no drama from becoming toxic positivity?
I would love if there was toxic positivity. That would be like, right. Like,
so I think it's fair to say you haven't gotten there yet.
No.
Yeah, it hasn't.
No. It's a work in progress, and it is work. And it is, having the conversations, putting the information out there. It has, I would say, very much improved the culture at the Roadhouse in a positive way, but there's a lot of work a long way to go and a lot more work to do to make sure that we are continuing to move in that direction, because things can very quickly, right? We're not having the follow-up conversation. Things are going wrong. Food's running late. We're short staffed, and you feel it. Everyone's feeling that negative energy. Those things happen. So staying consistent and staying on it and doing the reminders, and, you can do stuff too, like before the shift, talk about one of the techniques. After the shift, ask your staff, what technique did you use tonight? I mean, there's lots of different ways to keep it going without like just reteaching the information to groups, which is also important. But
well, and I think, and Ari just put it into the chat as well, but being no drama does not mean that you don't still have conflict or talk about them. You just do them in a less dramatic way. I think that toxic positivity, where we're all just pretending to put a smile on our face and be inauthentic and not sincere, isn't going to be a positive work culture. I think no drama is saying, we can agree without being disagreeable, or we can disagree without being disagreeable. And like, you can disagree without being dramatic. Right. So you still have these conversations just in a much more positive way. And you actually move to resolution rather than stay kind of in
solution oriented
area.
Right. This happened, but how are we going to move forward? What are we going to do to,
have you noticed an impact on the work culture since you've been teaching this? Have you noticed more positivity or more compassion? And I guess overall, have you noticed less drama?
I have noticed less drama. There's like some folks that have just, I think, like naturally weeded themselves out. And the more we teach it, the more we, push on it, the more that the culture stays positive. I will say that the folks that then kind of slip back to their old ways, or if we do happen to hire somebody that, does exhibit more negativity than we'd like, that they really stick out. That it's like, whoa, like the culture really has changed slowly and steadily, so that when that creeps back in, like, obviously, like I'm recognizing it and noticing it, but like even other staff are like, oh, we've kind of like gotten away from doing some of those things and being as dramatic as some work cultures are.
This is a question. It came in anonymously, but I imagine others may have the same one. How do you introduce these concepts when the person at the top of the leadership is the main culprit of many, if not all, of the negative issues that are happening?
Yeah, that's a good one. And very, different from how it came about at the Roadhouse. I think that this comes down to buy-in and the culture and the, company or organization or what have you, is that you want to build and what you want it to be. I think it is hard if, the folks at the top at whatever level that they're on, if they're not buying into this, then, probably they're not going to even implement it into the culture. Or if they are, that's not going to be helpful if you're not leading by example. Because I think most of us know when we see folks that it's do what I, say, not what I do type of a thing. Most folks are just going to be like, well, you're not doing it. Why should I?
Yes.
So I think it does require that folks at the top, if they're going to implement it into their culture or into systems or what have you, that they have to believe in it, or there's no real reason. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to see those positive benefits.
Yeah, it's a lot harder when they don't. We talk a lot about at Zing Train about the sphere of influence that we all have, where maybe we aren't the leader or the one who, so, quote unquote, the top, but what can we impact? So if this is my one little corner in my department, like I can make this a no drama environment. And while it can be very challenging because all the outside is maybe still very dramatic, that's when I can use my bubbling up techniques even more and create that bubble and still have my sphere of influence in my little area be not toxic positivity, but just be as non-dramatic and as productive as it can be. So I think that's very true. So another question from Stephanie, what's a favorite use of the drama-free language with your staff? Do I have that right? Favorite use of the drama-free language or examples of drama-free language that people use?
I mean, some of the stuff that I referenced, just like drama-free, like positive, like some of the positive, language that we use then.
We can follow up on that question too.
Yeah.
I may have read it incorrectly.
Yeah.
So Stephanie's putting in there. So using the terminology. So what's some of the favorite terminology perhaps?
Yeah, in a positive way. I know we have a lot of the stuff obviously that I covered on the like no skunking and I don't know, there's things that are, I suppose there should be in that list of the positive things that we're asking folks to do. Yeah.
We have a follow-up. We talk a lot about the power of language. So using more positive phrases. So instead of saying to a coworker, you have to do this, it's a lot nicer to say would you please do this? And we have some follow-up kind of power of language stuff that we can send that may help answer that question. And if it doesn't, happy to follow up offline as well.
Absolutely.
So a good question too, coming in from Vicky, how do you suggest we start this in our department? In other words, what is the first step to trying to implement no drama?
I would say to come up with a shared set of values, beliefs, what you want to have in there, right? Because you might look at the list of things that we have and you're like, well, I think these three would be great and be a great fit. And it's something that we could easily kind of weave in the beginning and kind of get that early buy-in. So I would say probably sitting down with, leaders or whoever might be implementing the information to figure out, you could use these as a backbone. You might come up with some other things on your own. But I would say, selecting the things, it could be structuring it the same way or not. And then figuring out which ones, again, that you want to focus on, getting it documented, and then deciding on how you're going to roll that out to staff. So again, it could be at a department meeting, a weekly meeting. If you do have classes, I know not all restaurants and organizations have classes the way that we do. It's been very helpful for us though to do that in an orientation, a basic orientation class. But I'd say there's lots of different ways that you can, just first decide and then roll it out to staff. There's lots of good ways.
Yeah. We have time for a few more questions. Sarah's asking, with the current staffing levels and issues, which I certainly know the Roadhouse is like every other restaurant, retail, and business, it feels like, with staffing issues and things. Have you been experiencing more difficulty implementing these systems recently than you have in years past?
That is a very good question. And I would say probably on the whole, yes, given the lack of staffing, we get kind of staffed up in a certain area, but then we're kind of short over here. And again, if people, don't get the information pretty soon after starting, and then we don't also have those folks the leaders to reinforce it, then things can kind of, right? The negativity can kind of creep in. And if we're not catching it and not giving the reinforcement, so if we're short on, which is the case for us right now, is that the front of the house leadership team is pretty stretched. So I don't think it's terrible, but have we seen can things creep back up pretty quickly if we don't have the bandwidth and the folks to reinforce the stuff? Absolutely. So again, it's nothing dramatic, nothing like crazy, like all of a sudden the culture is like completely turned around. But sure, if we're not, we don't have the people to help, to, like I said, to reinforce and to focus and to listen and to coach and to give that feedback, then I mean, things can easily kind of creep back in a different way.
Yeah. There's another question too, in regards to the earlier question about leadership, when leadership can be the problem. Do you have any suggestions for how to help leaders to see the benefit of this kind of positive culture shift?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that the whole goal, right, is for things to flow more cohesively, for everybody to have a better work experience, and for then our guests to also have a better experience, because we're working together, there's better teamwork, people are staying grounded, we're staying more calm. So, I mean, those are, and then honestly, everyone makes more money, right? As can be part of like some of the benefits. So, I mean, if that list of things isn't compelling, then I mean, there's so many good things that can come from it. So many good things. Like I said, really the cohesion, the respect, people feeling like they're heard, that we're treating each other with dignity. Like, again, power of language, that we're asking people to do stuff and not like demanding and yelling and like, oh, we're stressed out. I just need this. I need this. Like, that's not helpful. It's not supportive of each other. So the more we can stay calm and support each other, the better, like I said, work experience we'll have, the better time I believe our guests will have. And then in theory, again, people can make more money too.
Yeah. When you all were introducing the no drama, did you all do a bottom line change project on it? Did you do a bottom line change?
Yeah, so Ari did an original bottom line change on
So we'll
it.
share what that is in just a moment, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, he did, and I think there might have been a second version. I'm pretty sure there was a second version of it. It's been about 5 years now, so it's not coming to mind exactly, but I'm pretty sure I could dig up, like we probably did follow like our systems and the recipe on doing a bottom line change on it.
Yeah. And so Ari, he's writing in the chat to us, he did do one. And part of the bottom line change, the first 2 steps, the first is to create compelling reasons for a change. And so it's, why do we want to make this change of going to no drama? What are the benefits of it? And then writing a vision of what it looks like when we are no drama. And I think having compelling reasons and a picture of what success looks like is a great way to help leaders see the benefit, because you're telling them why this is a good idea and what it's going to look like when we're doing it. And sometimes when you paint that picture, it becomes a lot harder to argue with. So yeah, doing like a bottom line change around it, and we can have some resources that we can send on that. We are almost at our time for an hour. I want to appreciate Lisa so much for sharing so much wonderful information with us, taking time out of what I know is other things that are going on in the restaurant to spend this time with us. So thank you. I want to thank you all in terms of our guests, our attendees, for joining us, for spending time with us, asking some really wonderful questions. If your questions did go unanswered, we will make sure to get back with you as soon as we're able to answer some of them, because there were a lot of them. Thank you. Thank you. As we wrap up, a huge thank you to Mara and Alice for managing the chat and all of the Q&A, all of you commenting and helping out and giving some great suggestions in the chat as well. I saw lots of try this answer, or this is what I like to say. And I think that is just wonderful to have this community. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation, things that you maybe want to see in future webinars. I already saw some suggestions in the chat. Mara's going to drop a link. I think it's already in there. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill out the survey, we really love to hear the feedback. We are going to send out a recording of the webinar in the days to come, along with the slide deck, so you can look for that. And as we wrap up, again, just a very sincere thank you to Lisa. It really is a pleasure. We spent so much time together for so many years, and now we don't. And it's just wonderful to get to be together for a little bit. I also want to give a deep congratulations for Lisa on her path to partnership and what's going to be happening in the months to come. It's just very exciting to see. You are already wonderful in the job that you do, and you're going to be an amazing managing partner as it happens. And thank you. Thank you so much for your expertise and knowledge and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.
With that, we can kind of wrap up. Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your Thursday, a nice weekend. If you're celebrating this weekend, a nice holiday as well. And we'll hopefully see you in a webinar, a workshop, in person, or somewhere soon. Thank you all so much. Take care. Bye all.